Hello and welcome to Opt to Thrive, episode 43. The power of a midlife reset. How Joe got her mojo back.
Welcome to Opt to Thrive, your go-to podcast for women's wellness in midlife, designed to educate, support, and inspire you to live your very best life. And now your host, Dr. Karina Sims.
It has been pretty busy for me the last little while. I've welcomed another group into the Midlife Reset program. And so I've been busy onboarding them and getting them set up and still working on building the program. And now I'm offering monthly workshops. So we've given the first one of those this month, which has been really super fun. And that was on my birthday. I did that on the morning of my birthday. And just so happened also to be the same day that we've decided this year to have our Thanksgiving. So I've mentioned in previous episodes that my girlfriends really hold me to Thanksgiving. So yes, I'm in Australia and I'm still having Thanksgiving, even though I've migrated and I've lived here for 25 years. My Aussie friends will not let me get away with not celebrating Thanksgiving every year. And so this year I got to make the pumpkin pie, which was fun. And I also had some surprise visitors on the Friday night at about 10 p.m., which is, about my bedtime. Maybe a bit surprised I was actually still awake. It turns out my husband was working at keeping me awake because my son and his girlfriend were popping in for the weekend, much to my surprise, which is just beautiful. So about 10 o'clock, there was a knock on the door and, oh, who's this at 10 o'clock at night? And it ended up being, as I said, my son and his girlfriend, which is just such a beautiful surprise here for my birthday. And then my birthday was Saturday, and that morning they came over. So they've stayed on. Now that I've got our little house on the property all set up, they were able to stay out in the other house. So almost like having a little Airbnb. And they popped around for breakfast and brought me my birthday present. And it's really funny. I have been wanting a Ninja Creamy for a really long time. Some of my girls from the Fit Physician have been talking about these Ninja Creamies for a little while. They're an ice cream maker, if you haven't heard of one before. And I've been wanting one for a while, but it's just one of those things, maybe in the summer, maybe I'd go out and get one for myself and maybe play with making some protein ice cream. That's what I've been kind of excited about because that's the stuff that we talk about with the Fit Physician girls. Anyway, I told the kids what I wanted this year was a bike helmet because my bike helmet's really old and it's the padding in the forehead of my helmet has actually fallen out and the Velcro is no longer sticky. And so I've got some rough Velcro that just scratches my forehead every Sunday when I ride. And I just have not been bothered enough to go and get a bike helmet. And so I gave them that idea for the birthday. But I'm glad they ignored me because I got a Ninja Creamy, and it just turns out that it was my son's girlfriend's idea, and I just couldn't love her anymore. What an amazing present. I can't wait to use it. I'll let you know when I do and all the amazing things that I come up with. So then, Saturday night, we had our Thanksgiving. We had it in the garden because it was really temperate weather. It was kind of mid-20s, and the garden is looking absolutely spectacular. My husband is obsessed with growing lawn. I'm not exactly sure where that comes from because it's a lot of lawn, and fortunately, he has a ride-on mower, and it still takes probably a couple of hours to mow the lawn. So the other day, he said to me, why did you make me grow so much lawn? Obviously very sarcastic because I'm the one that was asking, why are you growing so much lawn? You're just making so much work for yourself. Anyway, as I've talked about before, all the blooms are going. We've got, the roses and we've got the gerberas, and now I've got more daisies and lavender, and it's just absolutely stunning. The hydrangeas are starting to bloom. I've got some other unusual shrub. Yeah, it's amazing. So it was really lovely to have everyone around and have a beautiful setting outside and put the fire pit up and get that going for the night. Had a little bit of bubbles and just had such a beautiful time. But enough of that. Let's get on with our conversation today. I am recording the intro now to a session that I did over the weekend. You're in for a real treat today. We get to talk to one of my very first founding members of the Midlife Reset program. I wanted to have this conversation for a few reasons. So Jo, who you're going to meet in a minute, joined me, as I said, one of the very first members, and I have been able to watch her transformation over the last, let's say, August, September, October, November, so about 4 months, a little over 4 months now, and it has just been such a fun process, and I think that a lot of my listeners are going to really resonate with Jo's story. I hope that she maybe brings some awareness, some more awareness to, what you're feeling and what we need to be looking for. You might start to see yourself in Jo's story and hopefully get some inspiration and some guidance about, where to from here and how to feel better and take some control over your body at this midlife period if you're noticing some of these changes like Jo did. So let's get into it. I hope that you enjoy listening as much as I enjoyed recording this conversation with Jo. All right, Jo, thank you so much for joining me today. You are the very first guest from our Midlife Reset program, which I'm really excited to have this chat with you for lots of reasons. I think that your story is so relatable. I think there's a lot of women will relate to you and where you're at in midlife and where you're at with your health and your journey and all these things. And also, as we talked about how, I've watched you come in to the program. So that was at the beginning of July. And you've had a pretty quick transformation. I mean, you came in, you knew what you wanted, you know what your goals were, you were already kind of working in that direction, but it's been really fun to watch you kind of woe to go, so to speak. And so I thought it would be fun to have this chat with you and kind of break it down for people. So if there are women out there who aren't quite yet convinced that this is what they need to be doing is strengthening their bodies and, paying more attention to nutrition, et cetera, and all the benefits that come along with that, which we'll get into. Yeah, hopefully this kind of gets a few people thinking. And so let's start with a little introduction, Jo. Could you just maybe introduce yourself and then maybe just start with if you can go back to prior to July, where you were at that time and then kind of what led you into joining me in the Midlife Reset.
Well, my name's Jo and I am 56 years old and I live in a country town in South Australia where I've been living for the last 30 years. I work locally as a speech pathologist and travel around the region. I am married and have 2 children who are, Alex is just about to be 21, Esther's just turned 19, and they're sort of moving out of home pretty much. So becoming, I guess, an empty nester and just sort of exploring that next stage of life. So back in July, I guess I can go back a wee bit before that, obviously going through perimenopause, which for me was not a massive upheaval. There was a few bits and pieces that were a bit unusual and I did feel a little bit out of control of my body, but it wasn't a massive journey that I went through, but had reached menopause and had noticed a few things happening in terms of changes in my body, and getting a real belly roll around the middle was one of those changes, which I was finding a wee bit frustrating, given that I have always made an effort to sort of look after my health and keep myself fit, and also had done quite a lot of, work on nutrition and eating the right diet for me over the years. But all of a sudden, here I was just kind of stacking on the weight and my clothes were becoming tight and uncomfortable. So that was one thing. I had also started to listen to your podcast, which I'd found extremely helpful in unpacking all of the aspects of menopause and I guess perimenopause and menopause and this whole transition. And I'd found it very interesting to listen to, I guess, just sort of open slather the whole, this is perimenopause, this is menopause, this is what some people are going through. and giving me almost like some lines in the sand where I could sort of say, oh, yeah, that's happened to me, but this has not happened to me. So just to give me a bit of information over this very confusing time in my life. So I had really enjoyed listening to the podcast. I'd learned a lot. And I guess in July of this year, when you were talking about the Midlife Reset program, I was curious and I thought, oh, I think this could really help me. I guess one of my really big driving forces was around all the talk that you had done around strength training. So, although I thought that I had sort of maintained my fitness well and I was walking every day and, physically active around the house and in the garden, I definitely had never done any strength training in my life. And I could hear that message coming through loud and clear. And obviously, as I'm getting older, felt that it would be a really good time to start to look into that and get that to be a part of my life. So they were the sort of factors that sort of, I guess, caught my curiosity and brought me towards the program. And I think the final part of the puzzle that sort of and resulted in me joining in was also around, I guess, as I'd mentioned, the time of my life. The kids were sort of heading off on journeys of their own and sort of having that moment of, oh, well, who am I now that I'm not a full-time mum? And I think that the final deciding factor for me was really just doing something for myself, 100% for myself. And that was what sort of prompted me to throw my hat in the ring and join.
That's awesome. I love that. Becoming an empty nester and thinking, right, okay, who am I now? Most of us will go through that. So
Yeah, I mean, raising children was, an amazing experience. And, I'd obviously come at that quite late in life with having my children 35 and 37. So I'd done a lot of living before that. I'd really gotten used to having, my own schedule, my own life, my own whatever. And then having the kids was a most amazing experience. But obviously, a lot of energy goes into growing children. I always say it's the toughest gig of my life, even having worked in early childhood for many years before, and I thought I knew stuff, I knew nothing. I did it and I did it joyfully and I did it with, full commitment. But it was nice to kind of step back and go, okay, that particularly the cognitive load had kind of lessened, all that stuff you hold, had really lessened. And it was like, okay, well, what a beautiful time to sort of really stop and focus on me. Yeah. And one of the things that you said in one of your recent podcasts, I think, don't quote me if I've got it wrong, was around the definitions from different nationalities around menopause or perimenopause, menopause in particular, not being the end of something, the death of something, you're old, you're burnt out, you're done, but more a rebirth, a renewal, I can't think of all the words that we
yeah, I think
use,
those
but
are
yeah,
good words. Yeah.
yeah, and sort of having that opportunity to grow and thrive in this different body, in this different time, in this different mindset has been, yeah, it's been really inspirational.
Yeah. And it's a now what, isn't it? Now
Yeah,
what?
yeah,
Now
yeah,
what?
yeah,
So
exactly.
had you started to notice at all any changes in your strength? You're starting to think about, oh, I think I need to start adding some strength training. Were you starting to notice that physically, or was that more intellectual?
I think it was more from an intellectual point of view, from your discussion around it. A couple of things had happened for me in one of my earlier regular blood tests. I'd had quite a massive drop of vitamin D, which was sort of unexplained. And I guess I didn't. I took some vitamin D and supplemented it and had subsequent tests, but it did really just sort of drop off the edge of a hill when, again, I'd done nothing different. So that was sort of, I guess, one physical thing which made me worry about my bone health
Yeah.
a wee bit, but I did not pursue that. I do now have a referral for the bone bus and I will be getting a scan. So that was one. But no, I mean, as I say, I've always been physically active. I've been out in the garden, weeding and digging and stuff. I guess for me, I had had chronic headaches for a really long time. So I'd had sort of some neck and shoulder sort of issues where I was not using the correct muscles, and it really didn't take much to push me into a sort of migraine grade pain that might last 2 or 3 days. So I knew that I had some restrictions, so that if I perhaps decided to pick up a paintbrush and paint a wall and spend half a day looking up, I knew I was in for it and I'd have a massive headache. So I guess upper body strength, yes, I knew that I was not as strong as I should be, but everything that I tried to do in order to fix that would just result in more headaches. So I sort of kind of was on that downhill spiral. But in terms of the rest of my body, I was doing yoga and doing core strength and so on. Hadn't really tweaked to it. Retrospectively, I can
Well, that's
see
where I
that
was
I'd
going.
lost a huge amount of strength. Yes, yeah. So I guess if we can go on to that next sort of part of it,
Yes, please do.
yes, yeah. So my strength training journey started in physio rehab. I'd had a niggling knee and had gone skiing last year. And as soon as I got on the slopes, snow skiing, realized that I did not have the muscle strength to support the joint that needed the extra support. Being very good at mind over matter, I continued to ski for the entire week, got myself a little neoprene brace and kept on going, but ended up sustaining a fair bit more damage to the already niggly knee, and had an arthroscopy done to sort that out, which was, I guess, a really good outcome in that I hadn't done something seriously serious. I'd only just made a bit of a mess, and went into a physio rehab class. And that's where we started to build the strength, with my goal at the time to be able to go back to the snow this year. So bit of context to that, both of my children worked a season at Thredbo. So my son worked in 2024 and my daughter worked in 2025, operating the lifts. So it was a brilliant opportunity for me to fulfill my passion and my dream of going skiing. So I definitely had some significant goals to recover from the arthroscopy to get myself onto the slopes. And so started to do that strength training, particularly in my legs. And also within that, because I'd said to them, I want to go skiing, they were then tailoring the strength training to skiing maneuvers and also the fitness kind of stuff of I was jumping over blocks and onto boxes and off and so on as well. When I hit the slopes, I was absolutely blown away by the amount of strength, the comparison between those two seasons. I also, on reflection, feel that I probably skied better than I had in my 40s. So
Wow, that's
that
amazing.
was absolutely mind-blowing because, because I skied since I was 3 years old, I know it, I live it, I breathe it, my body knows what to do, my brain loves the adrenaline and going fast. And I was like, okay, I'm in my 50s now, I have to override the fast, and I have to override that, need to do things as if I were in my 20s or 30s. And I never expected to be able to do it as if I were in my 30s. Again, if that makes sense,
It
you talk about
absolutely makes
adjusting
sense.
things. Yeah. And yet, I was like, I was just so full of joy that week. As soon as I strapped my skis on every day, I just went, and no one could stop me. The kids were both blown away, and sort of my son was saying, I can't keep up with you when we're off the green stuff. You just go, and I'm desperately, trying to go. And the other part that I really noticed around that was obviously a huge amount of strength gain. So therefore, understanding how much muscle strength I had lost in that, I guess, 20 years since my mid-30s, really. It's kind of staggering to think about, that I wasn't really aware of. And also the recovery was incredible. So I had no aches and pains. Usually it's crippling. By the third day you can barely put your feet into your boots. And there was none of that. The recovery was incredible. So very inspiring for me.
That's awesome. It's such a good illustration of, what we're talking about today.
Mm,
Coming into the program, let's just take a step back to that. You
mm,
had some clear goals because, so, like you said, you had already
mm,
started kind of rehabbing that knee, and I think you were doing that a day a week. Is that
mm-hmm,
about right?
mm-hmm,
Yeah. And so
mm-hmm.
you came into the program and you had some pretty clear goals. Can you talk about what those were?
I will try and remember.
Okay.
So I think they were to continue with the strength training and build that into my day-to-day life. And yeah, so I think it was around acknowledging that it was that it was necessary, which I had done through listening to your podcast, but then kind of going, well, what does this look like for me? How do I build that into my
Yeah.
everyday routine and
Yeah.
make it a consistent thing, make it something that I enjoy and that I can embrace? Because I've never been, I've always wanted to be outside walking or riding a bike. Never really keen to be inside with a machine and trying to sort of then go, well, how does that fit into my life? How can I make that a thing that I'm inspired to do? It was also then to really review the nutrition side of things twofold, I guess. One was so that that strength training could happen, so really looking at the protein targets, and also to address the belly roll and the fact that my clothes were tight and I just didn't feel comfortable in my own skin anymore. So I was really keen to sort of address that and I guess come to a point that I felt not just comfortable in my own body, but proud of my own body as well.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so I didn't need to be super thin or, walking on a runway or anything like that, but I just wanted to feel comfortable and happy and content. Maybe that's the word, content. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they were my main goals that I can recall.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the one that stood out for me was I think you wanted to increase, and you said it before we got on today. You were saying, "Yes, I got my third session in this week," and
Oh,
I think
yes. Yeah.
one of the goals was to kind of institute a program that you could do 2 or 3 days a week. Um,
Mm.
yeah, so you're doing that, which is amazing.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Look, it's. I still feel that that part is a work in progress.
Yeah,
So it's easy to do, and I'm happy to do the sort of sessions that I've sorted out. I don't know whether I've got the sort of projection into the future sort of sorted. I've got a couple of hand weights and I do my other two sessions at home. I'm still in the physio rehab class, and that's great. I've got, excellent programs. I'm working on my upper body strength so that I can address the headaches and also then build the body strength without, triggering my headaches. So that's again a work in progress, which is really positive and exciting. It's very exciting
yes,
not to have a weekly massive headache that you're sort of battling through. It has been amazing. Yes, but it's just sort of just building it in so that it's going to happen as, I guess for me, I'm probably quite a routine person. I get up in the morning, I walk my dog, I go to work. On Mondays, I go to the rehab class. On Tuesdays, I go to yoga, and so I just kind of need to just nail when those things are going to happen. I had a little epiphany recently that, maybe on Saturday mornings, the dog didn't need to be walked and I could have that time for me to do my program. So that's sort of, secured another spot. But I just feel like that third one's kind of floating. And then I'm kind of also thinking about once I get into that routine, what happens when, because if we're looking at the strength training with the progressive overload, then I can't just be there with my one set of 3 kilo hand weights and then one great big 12.5 kilo thing. I
yeah,
don't even know how to describe what it
yes,
is. There needs to be something. What's next? I think
yes,
you might have said that. What's next? Or what now? What now?
yeah,
Yeah, so I think I probably need to just continue that little pathway. I'm very happy how far I've come,
yeah.
but I also feel like I need to just make sure that that's, it's not something that is just going to get dropped like a hot stone if there's any distraction or obstacles in the way.
And that's something I think we've talked a bit about in the program is all of this, the fiber, the protein, the resistance, finding a way that fits into your life so that,
Mm,
you're
mm,
not building your
mm.
life around something. It's actually just like you said, if you enjoy it, you're going to be more likely to do it
Yeah,
if you can get
yeah,
it into your routine. So I
yeah,
think you're
yeah.
right on target for where you should be.
Yeah, and I think, that headset has really shifted from, listening to podcasts and thinking, yep, I can hear what you're saying, Karina. Yep, yep. I don't want to be the person that falls and breaks a hip and doesn't make it out of hospital. So, you're giving me an opportunity to start that now. Okay, I need to kind of face reality and come up with something to now being on that sort of trajectory, but knowing that I could still, firm it up a bit and
Yeah.
build it again. But, certainly the results in terms of the strength and to have such an incredible sort of illustration of that with the skiing trip was really extremely motivating. So it's really sort of built that little fire inside me of, yeah, this is the right way to go. And yes, I'm probably becoming a little bit of a zealot. And in my, I think I have mentioned in my work, I do work with women in their sort of midlife time, either perhaps in communication or swallowing or voice kind of interactions in the speech pathology world. And quite often weight and diet sort of comes up, and I start to sort of feed little things that I've learned from you into the conversation. There was one that really stark one that sort of stuck out for me, where a client had been to the doctor, and she happened to have quite a high body weight, but to me looked quite in proportion. And the doctor had sort of weighed her and said, oh, well, you weigh too much. You'll just need to cut your calories in half, and left her with it. And I just said, oh, she was saying to me, look, I eat really carefully and we don't eat very much. How do I cut the calories in half? And I'm like, I think you need to kind of get a second opinion on that one. I think there's some other things, and just kind of protein and fiber and exercise. So yes, I guess some of that stuff has become, part of my rhetoric. And obviously in conversations with my peers, it comes up as well.
I know your diet pretty healthy coming in. We've talked about what a great metabolism that you have, and you've done some high protein stuff in the past. Can you talk a little bit more about maybe, the changes that you've made with nutrition and how that's kind of fit in and what that's done for you?
Look, there's been quite a bit of sort of searching around to try and work out what I'm doing or what I had been doing that was right and what I had been doing that was perhaps not completely optimum, and sort of just tweaking it. I guess an introduction to tracking has been an interesting journey for me. Again, I've not had any history in tracking food. I didn't really know what you were talking about for the first couple of sessions. So that's sort of been interesting to actually look at, what I think is a good sort of balanced diet versus what is sort of the optimum diet to have. I'd had protein powder before and had sort of dropped off on using it a little bit. So I just have one serve of that a day that just sort of keeps me up into the sort of protein levels that I'm aiming for. And I guess just, looking at the snacks that perhaps I have, because I'm quite well known for my ability to snack. I have a shopping hamper that carries my lunchbox with me with all my tea thermoses and coffee thermoses and water bottles and so on when I head off to work. And part of that is the nature of the work that I do, because I get into the car and I go out on outreach. And so I've sort of got to have everything I need in a day. And I don't know how hungry I'm going to get in that day. There's a lot of packing and unpacking cars. There's lots of crawling around on the floor playing with children. So it's quite an active role. So I sort of have to be prepared. But I guess I've sort of reviewed what's in that hamper and kind of gone for things that, have a higher fiber content and a higher protein content. And I do think that I've increased the fiber content quite considerably as well. I guess for me, there's been a couple of other challenges in that since my early 30s, I've really aimed to have a fairly low gluten, low dairy diet. So it's then been quite tricky. I might sort of think, okay, I've got the fiber and I've got the protein, but I've introduced quite a lot of gluten and quite a lot of dairy. And so then I'm starting to sort of feel the effects of that. So that I still feel like I'm tweaking that a little bit as well. So what have I done differently? I guess, breakfast, I probably added more protein to it, more fruit. As I said, the snacks, I've tried to go for higher fiber, higher protein alternatives to things that I might have had before. And I guess the tracking side of things has been sort of interesting, because it will sort of show me, what are sort of good choices to make and what are less good choices. It hasn't changed to the point that I won't, have a treat. So it was my daughter's birthday on Thursday, and, I made a mud cake, and, I've had mud cake a couple of times since then because it was quite a big cake, and I might have a smaller slice of that, or just sort of keep it in mind. But it's certainly not a punitive diet at all. It's a very fulfilling diet. I, eat regularly, I'm eating good food, but I'm also quite happy to have, something that doesn't sort of necessarily fit the optimum for enjoyment. And it's good. I'm not feeling like I'm depriving myself. It was quite interesting to work on the change of the body composition and to sort of be dropping the calories. And again, probably I found that a little bit tricky because I may have shared with you at some point that I was known quite well in my 20s and 30s, pretty much for going, I'm starving, I'm full, I'm starving, I'm full, I'm starving, I'm full, throughout the day. And I know when I first started my career, my flatmate said to me one day, you come home and you literally graze from 4 till 6 o'clock. Like you're just going back and forth to the cupboard, snacking on this, snacking on this, snacking on that. And then at 6:30, you turn around and say, so what's for dinner tonight? And I was, completely oblivious to this. So again, there's been that sort of adjustment in terms of creating the calorie deficit to change the body composition, but also listening to my body and trying to work out, what's habit, because I like to eat from 4 till 6 in the evening, and then I like
Yeah.
to eat dinner. Am I actually hungry, or is that just my routine versus, actually listening to my body when I am hungry? And yes, it's been, things like thinking about that hunger scale and going, yeah, okay. And at the other end, like if you've eaten enough and you're full, stop eating, that
Yep.
kind of thing. Don't eat. Yeah, so that's been interesting. And I guess I've just had a recent sort of experience where I had a couple of weeks off and didn't do a lot of strength training and came back and just kind of got back into it where I left off. I didn't sort of back off at all. I just kind of picked up where I left off. And then, we increased some weights in the rehab class. And I said to you, I've had these days where I've just been ridiculously hungry and everything I've eaten, it just feels like it doesn't touch the sides. And because I've been trying to sort of think about not sort of habit eating, then it was sort of, I'd kind of gone a little bit the other way where my body was kind of screaming at me all morning. And on the third day, I had a protein bar and went, oh, okay. I was hungry. So
Yeah.
that's been interesting. I don't know if that makes sense,
It
but
does.
it's
Do
been
you
an
feel like
interesting.
that you're listening more to the hunger cues? Is
Yes, yeah, yeah. I think, as I say, with all the snacking, I'd kind of gotten into a routine of, I have my breakfast and at this time I take a protein
yeah.
shake with, protein and soy milk, and then I eat my lunch, and then I have an
Yeah.
afternoon snack, and then I have the snack when I get home, and then I have my dinner. And I'm guessing perhaps when I started tracking, it might have really hit home how, although I thought I was eating well and the foods I was eating well were good, just how much I was consuming. So I think
Yeah.
it was really telling for me when you set my first calorie target when we were doing the tracking.
Yeah.
And, we were aiming to sort of reach the fiber targets and get over those. And we were aiming to reach the protein targets and get over those. And then you put the calorie target in. And I've got to say, pretty naively, I really didn't know what a calorie was. Well, I did from the scientific point of view, but in
Yeah.
terms of what it meant to me and my body, what a calorie was and how many of them I might possibly need. And you put this figure in, and I absolutely smashed it by 1,000 that day. And then I was like, woohoo! And then, oh no, actually, that's not what I was aiming to do. So that has been a big learning curve and a big adjustment. And I guess in a way, it really made me go, ah, and that's why the belly roll's just growing and growing and growing. Okay, right. And then taken quite a bit of time to sort of come around to working out the energy budget.
Yes. I like to call it recalibration. We're just recalibrating our brain.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that part has been really interesting for me. Again, the tracking is still a work in progress, and we had that little webinar yesterday where I learned a huge amount. I think I may have said you've just blown my mind and left at that point. So still a lot of learning in that regard, and things that I could have done early on that would have made that tracking a whole lot easier and probably a whole lot more accurate. But again, it's just all part of the learning
We got
process.
there.
It's all good.
Yeah.
It's all good. Yeah.
Has it ever felt like a diet, Joe?
No,
Good.
not really. No,
Okay.
no, no. And my intent hasn't been to lose weight. And I guess in a way, I mean, if I sort of think about my weight, it's always been pretty steady from about my mid-20s up until this sort of period of time, and it would sort of vary by 2 or 3 kilos. And I think I said to you, it didn't matter whether I was fat or fit, I'd still sit within those,
Yep.
couple of kilos. And I'd probably gained, maybe 5 to 7 kilos on that, perhaps. And that's just sort of slowly reducing, but I'm not watching the numbers on the scales. I don't really care. I'm a whole lot more muscly. I know that muscle weighs more than fat, so I doubt that I'll ever be back to the weight that I was in my 20s, and that is fine because it is really very much about how I feel within myself. And it is really amazing. Like I really notice just in incidental sort of day-to-day things, you go do the shopping and you lift the shopping bags and you carry them in, you go, oh, I don't feel like my arms are going to pull out of my sockets, or I'm not like straining my shoulders up and clenching my jaw to sort of be able to lift these things. This morning I was just marinating some chicken for dinner and I got the mortar and pestle out and sort of was grinding the seeds and thought, oh, I can keep going. I don't sort of, I would just do it
Yeah.
for a short while and be like, I can't do it anymore. And then I'd try my other hand and so on. So just those little things. And definitely, when I get out in the garden and do some digging and I can just feel that I can use they always say when you're shoveling to use your legs to lift the weight of the stuff in the shovel. And I remember just being completely perplexed by that and going, I don't understand. And we've done a lot of garden work recently, and I'm like, oh, this is what they actually meant. I can, squat or not squat, lunge and then stand up, and it's not all on my arms and neck again. Yeah.
So less headaches.
Yep.
Yep. Feeling stronger, more functional, less
Yeah.
fatigue with what you're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, you're pretty happy with the body composition.
Yeah, yep, yeah, I am. I think I'd love to build some more arm strength and, probably back and shoulders. And I'm getting sort of closer to that. I did sort of have a little dabble and did something that was sort of involved lifting something very, very light, a bar with some springs for resistance against above my head. But I did also then have a headache that following week.
Oh no.
So
Okay.
but that's all right. I'm in the good hands of the physio, and we've treated it once and we'll treat it again, and we'll just keep working
Yeah.
again. I think the thing that's been really sort of fascinating in the strength training journey is that there'd be sort of going to do an exercise and identifying that, the muscles are sort of in sets. So the medial and lateral muscles, the inside of leg and outside of leg muscles above the knee, the inside ones were really doing nothing. And it was like, okay, you need to use that muscle. I'm like, cannot find that muscle. Like, yes, obviously it's there, but I can't find it. I can't operate it, and then, when I sort of start to do the stuff around the neck and the shoulders, it's like, well, you've spent all this time using the muscles at the back of your neck, but the muscles that are at the front of your vertebrae are not, they've switched off. I guess that's the sort of thing, that it's actually switched off, and we need to find them and reactivate them. And then, when you've got your muscle balance, you can build your strength without injury. Yes. And that for me has been really fascinating. I guess that's, my physics brain, my nerdy physics brain kind of going, oh yeah, it's a lever and a pulley. And if you've got like, yeah, yeah,
It
it
makes
has
it
been.
make sense. Yeah.
It makes it make sense to me, but it also has been fascinating because you think, oh, well, I've been doing all this, what I thought was, fitness and stuff, but there's a whole bunch of muscles that are just sitting there kind of like just hanging out, doing nothing. Yeah. I don't know if that's the same for you when you've been to the gym and done all your strength training, whether that was as stark as that, or whether it's just more
Well,
of me being in that remedial phase.
physics was never my strong suit. I do get exactly what you're saying. And I absolutely love the feeling of the muscles. Like you said, when you're doing the grinding of the spices, the mortal and pestle, is that
Mm,
yeah.
mm,
Feeling things working. I love that
mm,
sensation. And
mm,
we had a gathering here last night and we had to, cart out some heavy chairs and tables and things. And just to feel like I can pick up two heavy chairs at once. And like with
mm,
my 21-year-old son and his girlfriend and carry the same thing. It's awesome.
Mm,
I'm not
mm,
waiting around for
mm.
everybody else to do the lifting. I can help out. It's great.
Yeah, 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 it is. It's really rewarding.
So, Joe, working with the group, how did you find that? Because you made some
Often,
interesting comments. Sorry. Yeah.
oh, I really enjoyed the group. To begin with, it was obviously, we were sort of getting to know each other and sort of knowing what to talk about. But it was a really great support to check in. It was really nice to have people sort of doing the same things because, in my day to day, I work with people far younger than me. I'm, becoming one of the oldies and I probably make too many comments about menopause already. They're not that interested in hearing about my body composition and so on. So that side of it was great. It was really affirming to see I guess, the ups and downs of the journey as we went along. So sort of seeing people who'd had a week that was a bit rough and kind of identifying with that and knowing that it was all a normal part of that progression. And it was nice to sort of then be able to support them in those sorts of discussions or hear you supporting them and kind of then taking away from that and thinking, okay, yep. I really loved that the strength training part of that journey was really very much around building our bodies strong to get through this period, but for the future, and that it was a very much a self-care and a nurturing kind of thing to encourage us to continue on with that. And I had the experience in my 30s of doing some exercises in groups and really struggling with the vibe of the session, which was, bigger, faster, stronger, more, really beat yourself up because you're not good enough and you need to be better rather than, hey, I'm doing this because it's going to make me feel good and it's going to make my future life, easier and perhaps more enjoyable rather than I'm beating myself up because I'm not good enough. And that vibe really drove me away from that kind of exercise and that kind of group stuff. So I think, the flip side to be in a group and kind of going, yeah, you're doing it and it's great. And if you have a bad day or if you can't get to your exercise session, but you can do some squats whilst you're waiting for the kettle to boil, or you can do some lunges whilst you're walking the dog and he's sniffing the plants or whatever, that's a step in the right direction. So that self-love, that self-compassion, and that it's not a punitive, punishing kind of thing, was really beautiful for me. I really love that. And that motivates me. That motivates me in as much the opposite way as the other drove me away from it, where I was just like, nah, I can't, that's not me. I can't. I like myself more than that. But
Yeah.
what it resulted in me was not doing the
Yes.
sort of perhaps the exercises that I probably did need to be doing. Yeah. So no, that was really interesting. And I did say to you one day, I love coming onto the group because I can see the change in people's complexions.
Yes.
I think I said it to you off session because I didn't want to say it in front of everybody, but just watching, people's complexions change, pink cheeks and looking healthy and radiant. Radiant would be the word perhaps that I'd use. And it was really inspiring. That was really inspiring as well. Yeah.
I have reflected on the comment that you made before about that whole group dynamics and those kind of hard flogging sweat sessions,
Mm, mm,
really
mm.
punish yourself. And I think that happens to a lot of us who will just kind of slide into the background and then maybe just, enjoy our walking and enjoy
Mm,
the
mm.
yoga, those more gentle kind of things. And yeah, I think that speaks very well to we really need to find a little bit, I guess, in the middle. I mean, it's not punishment, but we do need the gentle stuff is beautiful, but there's got to be a place for
It's
the
not enough.
strength.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not enough.
Mm. No.
All right, Joe. So, what's the biggest surprise for you out of this whole kind of process that you've been
Oof.
through?
That's a really good question. What's the biggest surprise? Well, I guess, building my strength up to do something that have done all my life and to do it in a way that was like 20 years ago, as strong as I was 20 years ago, and not realizing that that was even possible and being able to do it was a huge surprise and a huge thrill. And I think, yes, I guess countering to that or along those lines was the surprise of realizing how much I had already lost.
Yeah.
That was kind of retrospectively was quite sort of staggering. Yeah, it really sort of stopped me in my tracks. Yeah.
And what a great motivator to have that experience.
Mm,
Yeah, because
mm,
you obviously love skiing and you want to continue to do it. So, what a great
mm.
motivator.
Yeah, yeah.
Thinking back to that ski trip, it just reminded me of something that you had said, and it was in regards to the nutrition that I think were your energy levels a bit better for longer periods of time?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, so I was really focusing on high protein and,
Yep.
really good breakfasts, a really good dense breakfast. And it was definitely sort of lasting me right through. So yeah, I wasn't sort of getting those really hungry periods of time where I might just need to have like a chocolate bar or something just to keep going. Yeah, so no, that was certainly quite evident that the work that I'd done had really sort of paid off in terms of that. Just so yeah, I guess it was, that you could sustain the energy because for me, there's nothing that I do that's physical that I would do from maybe 9 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon at sort of, I guess a medium to high level of physical output with, a stop for a coffee in the morning, a stop for lunch, and maybe a stop for a snack in the afternoon. There's nothing else that I would do. And to be able to sustain the energy throughout that. And also, in a cold environment, every time you get on the lift, it's freezing cold. And so your body's working really hard just to maintain your sort of core temperature and to not be completely fatigued at the end of it. So not sort of, I do remember one time going skiing and coming home at lunchtime and falling asleep because I was just so completely spent. So
Yeah,
yeah, not having that kind of, yeah, just being able to go all day.
all day and make your son keep up with you.
Yeah, that's right. I couldn't keep up with him on the flat.
Okay.
got to credit where credit's due.
All right. Awesome. And so from here moving forward, you're working on the workouts, getting them 2 to 3 days
Yeah.
a week, and you're still working on getting that kind of honed in. In terms of the nutrition, we talked about tracking, and we've talked about before in the group about how I don't think that it has to be a long-term thing. I think it's
Mm,
really
mm.
good for that recalibration to see where you're at. How do you feel moving forward in terms of nutrition?
I think that I'm very much on the right track. I possibly am not 100% sure about the quantity within a day.
Yep.
Um, Still, I would really like to just fine tune the stuff that we talked about yesterday of actually, popping in the recipes that I follow all the time and then having a true representation as opposed to what I've done, which is really just a guesstimate of, I had a buttered chicken, radio, here's all the buttered chickens that are listed. I'll choose this one.
Yep.
So I guess, it's kind of it's awoken the curiosity in me a little bit. But I think as we sort of talked about, I'd like to sort of just track a little bit more and then just try and ease back off of that. I think true within my nature, I don't necessarily like that level of scrutiny of
Yeah.
myself. I've never had a fit watch. I don't count my steps. I don't know. Even when I do, I might do a walk for autism or something, and we're supposed to count our steps. And I begrudgingly put my phone in my pocket when I go walking to find out how many steps I might do in a day. And similar with the tracking, somehow I feel quite resistant to knowing the numbers, but it has been very insightful.
Yep.
And very helpful and has really helped me. So I don't want to track forever more,
Yep.
but I'd like to sort of, like you say, just be able to sort of go, okay, how am I going and check in? Yeah. So I guess that's sort of where I feel like I'm going. So I'd like to know a
Okay.
little bit more about what I'm actually doing,
Yeah.
um, and just kind of really consolidate what I'm doing and then move away from it and just check in occasionally. Yeah.
Brilliant. So you see that that's a possibility. I guess that's what I was kind of asking is,
Yeah, yeah,
do
yeah.
you see this
Mm.
being something you could just do intuitively at some point once you have the recalibration all done?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think you
Yeah.
said, you said that so much more efficiently. But yes, yeah, yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, I'd like to just get that little bit more confident to know, oh yeah, that's okay. And I think you said it the other day, there's going to be days where I might meet my energy budget or be right, below it, but then there's going to be days when I am hungry and that's okay, you know.
Yes. Yes. Listen to
Yeah,
your body.
yeah,
It's
exactly,
best. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful.
So just building that confidence. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Joe, is there anything that you would say? I talked to you before we started today about my intention, really just wanting to, I guess, continue to get this message out about our bone health, our muscular health, and how insidious that is. I think you said that so
Mm,
well today
mm,
about how we're
mm,
losing the strength. We don't even really know it. And we might kind of start to work it out when we try to get off the ground and go, oh, that seems a little bit harder than it used to be.
mm,
Things
mm.
maybe it's happening in the background. So that's been the message I really wanted to get out. Is there anything else that you would like to say that you think maybe we haven't covered today?
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's any other sort of aspect of it other than going through the program has been really beneficial in terms of understanding what's happening to my body right now and knowing how to address it and how to address it in a, kind and caring and compassionate way. And the sort of outcome of that of feeling so much better, so much happier, so much more stable, and I guess sort of more in control of my body, because I think that is that really unsettling feeling of what is happening to my body, as probably where we started the conversation, what's happening to my body, what is going on, but then actually having some strategies to address that and take some of that control back, not in a sort of, over controlling kind of way, but just kind of going, yeah, these parts are to be expected. It's okay. And so it takes some of that fear, that worry, that anxiety out of it and just allows you to be as you are and take these sort of positive steps forward and know that you're heading in the right direction. I think the other thing that perhaps has also come out of it is in terms of, and I guess this comes from listening to the podcast, but also having the discussions that we've had where you think, well, if something's not right, I can go and ask for help, or I can go to my doctor and ask for certain direction or guidance or tests or whatever to sort of, again, maintain that sort of sense of calm and control and knowing that you know what's going on in your body. So that would be an additional part of that I guess we haven't really talked about
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
For instance, we had a conversation and I've gone and got a referral to have a bone scan so that I know
Yes.
where I'm at,
Yeah.
where I'm going. So I think
Yeah.
that side of that has also been supportive. It's not through you being a doctor for me, but it's giving me the information and the evidence and the confidence, I guess, to then sort of follow that up.
Yeah.
Encouragement, perhaps. Yeah, yeah. So no, that's
Yeah.
been an aspect that I think I also really value.
Thank you so much, Joe. I've just really enjoyed our conversation today, and I'm so grateful that you took the time out to share your story with all of our listeners. And I have no doubt that there will be women who really resonate with what you're saying and hopefully then make that next step and find somewhere to learn how to, do some strength training and work on their muscles and their bones and their chronic disease risk, all those things. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Corinna, and thank you for all the guidance. Really appreciated it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I've just absolutely loved the whole thing. And all you girls are
That's
amazing.
wonderful. Cool.
I hope that you have enjoyed this conversation with Joe today. And if it has sparked your interest in having your own midlife reset, and maybe you would like to work with me as well, I will be opening the doors to the program again early in the new year. So keep an eye out. I will be making some announcements as we get closer and I work out exactly what that's going to look like. The new year is a perfect time to make some changes, those changes that you've been wanting to make for a while, most likely. I would love to support you in your journey in your midlife reset. So I will leave a link in the show notes in case you want to check it out. If you haven't rated the podcast yet, could I ask that you do that before you leave today? That just makes the podcast more visible to others who might get something out of it as well. I hope you have a great week, everyone. And until then, I hope you opt to thrive.
The Opt to Thrive podcast is designed for information purposes only and is not engaged in the giving of medical advice. The information provided on the podcast should not be used for diagnosing or treating a health problem or disease. In no way should the information provided by Opt to Thrive be considered medical advice, and at all times the advice of a medical professional should supersede recommendations from Opt to Thrive. If you have or suspect you may have a health problem, you should consult your healthcare provider. The views expressed in this podcast are purely that of Dr. Sims and do not in any way reflect those of the institution she contracts for medical services to.
Thank you for listening to Opt to Thrive. If you've enjoyed listening, please rate and share the podcast. You can visit our website at opttothrive.com and leave a comment for any subjects you would like to hear more about.